أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين المبعوث رحمة للعالمين شفيع المذنبين وحبيب قلوب الصادقين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الأطيبين الأطهرين الهداة المهديين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today in the khutbah of Jumu'ah, I would like to speak about our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, in light of the fact that we just commemorated his martyrdom earlier this week. And I would like to briefly talk about the period of imamat of our sixth Imam. So our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, he was born, according to many narrations, in the year 83 after Hijrah, and he became the Imam after the death of our fifth Imam, Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, in the year 114. And that is just over a century after the death of the Prophet. So our Prophet was called back by Allah from this world in the 11th year of the Hijrah, and about 100 years later, our fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam, was martyred. So 100 years. Just for us to get an idea of what that means, 100 years ago would have been 1920, about the end of World War I. Today we have some pictures, we have recordings, we have audio, we have a recollection of that period in history that was not available to people at that time. But if you take away that technological change, what is World War I for somebody today? Chances are, if you are past middle age, then your grandparents would have had a living memory of that time. But that would have been at the edge of their memory. So if today you are 60 or above 60, then your grandparents or their elder brothers and sisters may have a memory of World War I, but it would probably be during their childhood and not something that they experienced as adults. And so the remembrance would have been somewhat foggy. And especially in a time when direct access was not available, it would have been possible for different tribes, different groups, to remember that same incident in very different ways. Who was the good and who was the bad side of that conflict? How did that war start? What was the direction it took? It would be very easy for people to have their own kind of stories that would develop. So similarly, at the time of the death of Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam, just over 100 years after the death of the Prophet, there was not the technology that we have today, but there were scholars whose job it was to give an explanation of Quranic verses, many of which talk about the events in the lifetime of our Prophet and the early history of Islam. They would give tajweed or tafsir classes. They would teach people how to recite the Quran, the qira'at of the Quran. They would provide people instruction in hadith and in other areas. So they were the schools and the official government reporters of their time. Imam Muhammad Baqir ﷺ's imamate coincided with a period when the Umayyad government had lost legitimacy. So there was a little bit of freedom that was given to our fifth imam to teach, not because the powers that had oppressed Ahlul Bayt before, or the nature of government in the Muslim world was going to change. This was not a change in intention, but it was a change in ability to oppress. When the Umayyad government was being questioned by people throughout the Muslim world, and they had to try to maintain their own authority, their own wealth, their own government, then they were not as able to effectively control what was being said in Medina and what Imam ﷺ himself and his followers were studying, and then the followers of the Imam were preaching to people in Medina and in particular in Kufa, in Iraq. So many of the close companions of our fifth Imam, later on who were going to be the followers of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq ﷺ, they were preaching in Kufa. Zurara ibn A'yan, Burayd al-Ijli, Abu Basir, Muhammad ibn Muslim, these very famous scholars who collectively narrated thousands of ahadith from our fifth Imam and our sixth Imam. They would come to Imam Baqir in Medina, and then they would teach people in Kufa. That was generally what was taking place at that time. Most of their learning was in Medina when they would visit our Imam. Previously, in the time of Imam Zainul Abidin, if a large number of people from Iraq were coming to visit the Imam, the governor of Medina would find out about it and become sensitive. He would send a report to the caliph in Sham, in Damascus, and they would say, watch what is being said. Observe. If you find anything dangerous, then let us know. And then they would begin to arrest those people. They would begin to cause difficulty for the Imam, for the followers of the Imam, for the general community of their Shia. But in the time of Imam Baqir, this did not take place. That process continued after the imamate of our sixth Imam. So from the year 114 until his death or his martyrdom in the year 148. And if you just do some quick math, that is 34 years approximately, the imamate of our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. 34 years is about one generation. If a person, for example, gets married at the age of 25, and then their childbearing years are for 10, 15, 20 years, between the age of 25 and that's maybe when their oldest child is born, their youngest child is born in their early 40s, then your middle child or your median child will be around the age of 34. And so sometimes, if you look at a family tree, somebody is the eldest child, somebody is the youngest child. The eldest child might be born to their parents in the 20s. The youngest child might be born to the parents in the 40s. But if you look over many generations, an average generation will be about 34 years. Sometimes a little bit more in urban environments, and sometimes a little bit less in rural or agricultural societies. About one generation. For that one generation, what was the major challenge that our sixth Imam faced, and how did he respond to it? Because I'm not trying to just give you history or facts or data, but we want to speak about the lessons that we learn from that period in the lifetime of our Imam. What does it mean for us? So we have 34 years. That's a long time. If you have a career, from when you begin your work until when you reach the peak of your career or near retirement, that is maybe going to be 30-some years. As I said, a generation changes within a family in about that period of time. One of those things that was taking place was as a result of the first factor I mentioned. What time was it? A generation was changing. By the time of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam, there were no more direct narrators or reporters who had seen the time of the Prophet. And very few, if any, who had seen the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam or Imam Hassan. This was all now history, but it was not something that people could find out from the first-hand witnesses. Just like today, you will not find World War I veterans that you can go to in society and ask them about their experiences in World War I. In fact, you won't even be able to find World War II veterans to ask them about their experiences. But if one or two World War II veterans are surviving, then that is not the case for World War I. So in the time of Imam Baqir alayhi salam, in the beginning of the Imamate of Imam Sadiq, those first-hand witnesses were lost. And in particular, there had been a strong period of censorship first, and then propaganda second, about what was the nature of Islam. First, censorship, meaning people were not allowed to fully report the teachings of the Prophet. And then propaganda, which means people were allowed to preach things that were made up, either borrowed from Christian or Jewish legend or mythology, or made up in order to benefit the government of Muawiyah and the Umayyads after him. So that was the first struggle of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, and also Imam Muhammad Baqir in the previous generation, that we have to preserve the true and the genuine, the authentic teachings of Ahlul Bayt. We have to preserve the genuine teachings of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or they will be lost. And that is always a challenge anytime that we have a transition in society. Sometimes the transition is generational. Those people who are alive and present and witnesses, when they get old and they leave this world for their eternal life, then a certain memory is lost. When ulama are no longer present in society, then their ilm also is often lost. Even if it's written down, the practical ilm and the experience and the wisdom is often not accessible for people. Sometimes the change is not only because of a generation, but it can be because of migration, it can be because of cultural change or other factors. But to preserve what is the true teaching of Islam, this was what Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam, they gave their most urgent attention to. In fact, it is narrated that our Imams said, and Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam said, that this was not a literal statement, but a statement of the importance of the preservation of religious learning. That I wish that my Shia, they had somebody to stand over them with a whip in order for them to come together and to learn about their religion. Now we know that this was not the akhlaq of the Prophet, and it was not the akhlaq of our imams or the akhlaq of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam to actually say that I will act harshly or compel people. But just like no good parent actually punishes their child physically every so often, it is still important for us as children to know that we owe that respect to our parents, that we should consider them to have the right to scold us, to discipline us, to express harshness with us when we do something wrong. Now, as a good parent, following the practice of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, they will not do that. But because they don't do that, I should not think that they don't have the right to do that. Or if they sometimes say something that is unjust or offensive, their obligation as Ahlul Bayt was to be kind to people. But they said to their followers that message of the importance of tafaqquh fi d-din, learning about your faith. So number one, learn about your religion. ليت السياط على رؤوس أصحابي حتى يتفقهوا في الدين. I wish that there were somebody to stand upon my followers, my Shia, my Ashab, with a whip, so that they would come together and they would see the importance of studying about religion. Don't take that as a literal statement, take that as a reminder from the Imam that people get distracted. I remember reading in the news about 15 years ago or about 12 years ago when there was the financial crisis, that because the stock market had a very rapid boom before the first election of President Obama before the year 2008, that in the early years of that post 9/11 period, many intelligent students, they went into business and finance rather than medicine or science or other fields that are important for society, that are beneficial for society, because that's where the money was. That's where the prestige was. You get a degree, you go and work for a financial institution, and after a few years, then you have that rich and famous lifestyle that people are tempted by. So because that's where the money was, and a lot of talent was being moved in that direction. That has an effect on society. If our talent doesn't care about religion, but just cares about making money, not only will our spiritual life decay, but even our infrastructure and our innovation, that will also suffer. So this is what Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam was speaking about. That I want my Shia, they have to learn about other fields as well. But يَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ, I want them to learn about their religion. They should not be ignorant. And if you look around you at the world today in society, there are many people who are highly educated. They may have credentials, they may have advanced degrees, they may be very experienced and successful in their own field. But if you talk to them a little bit about religion, you will find that they are illiterate about theology. Some of them are not religious. And they say, I don't believe in God because if God exists, how come earthquakes exist and how come there is evil? Or, now that is a real question, but it is a question that thinkers, Muslim thinkers and other philosophers and theologians and thinkers from human history have talked about, and we have very beautiful and very meaningful answers. And if you are a non-Muslim, I'm not saying you have to accept my answer. You have to believe what I say as a Shia Muslim or a follower of Ahlul Bayt. but at the very least, if you want to be religiously literate and you want to reject God and you want to reject religion because there is suffering or there is evil, at least you should know what are the answers that were given. Why do people believe in God? If you think that religion is just a bunch of magic and superstitions and God is some old man who lives in a cloud, and then you reject it, that is unfortunate for society. If you study, you learn, and you have your own opinion, then you can, as the Quran says, لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. You have your way and I have my way, and Allah will inform us on the Day of Judgment who was right and who was wrong. We can disagree respectfully, but the problem today, and you can try this yourself, that many people, they are highly learned, but they are illiterate when it comes to religion. And so they reject, not because they have thought about it, but because they just have a few rumors and superstitions and they think this is what belief in God is. This is what Islam is. And even beyond Islam, what religion in general is. So that's the first lesson that we should learn from the lifetime of our Imam, because he was the one who spread the importance of learning about religion in the Muslim world, and in particular among his followers. The second thing, and the last thing that we will have time for in this khutbah, is that during the time of our sixth Imam is when the Abbasid government was established. Many of you may have heard the name of Zayd al-Shahid. He was the son of our fourth Imam, the brother of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam, and the uncle of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. So he was the uncle of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, but he was younger than Imam Baqir, the younger brother of Imam Sadiq's father, who was Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. He rebelled against the Umayyad government at that time in the year 122. So about 8 years after the beginning of the imamat of our sixth Imam, towards the beginning of the imamat of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. And you can imagine what a big deal this was, that now, for the first time, about 60 years after Karbala, there was a mass movement. There's thousands of people who were inspired by Zayd al-Shahid. 60 years after Karbala, people who had been doing the majalis, commemoration, weeping for the martyrdom of Karbala, for the shuhada. Now they see thousands of people all over the Muslim world rising up and saying that we should avenge the injustice that was done to Lady Fatima, that was done to Imam Ali, that was done to Imam Hassan, that was done to Imam Hussein. So can you imagine how inspiring it must have been? And then Zayd was martyred in a tragic way. Imam Ja'far Sadiq, he was the Imam at that time. He wept and he sent money to the wives and the children, the orphans and the widows of those people who had joined Zayd in his struggle, to give them some support, because the government was not going to look after even their most basic needs. So the inspiration, and then imagine the disappointment. And then just 10 years later, this was 122, just 10 years later, As-Saffah, the Abbasid Caliph, he comes and he enters Kufa as the king, the Caliph. So now, the almost 100-year rule of Banu Umayyah, a little less, comes to an end, and the Abbasid government starts. And he also was a student of Imam Ja'far Sadiq, As-Saffah, and was very close to Ahlul Bayt. He knew some of the inside secrets of the Shia, because he was one of them. He used to sit with them. So imagine what a difficult period it was, politically speaking, socially speaking. And here again, Imam Ja'far Sadiq ﷺ told people that this is always going to go in the world. There will be ups, there will be downs. There will be success, there will be failures. Your candidate will get elected, your candidate will lose. There wasn't elections at that time, but I'm just drawing a comparison. Something will always go on. Don't be separate. Imam Ja'far Sadiq al-Islam was not separate from the going on of that time. As I said, he provided support. He provided even some financial assistance to those families of the soldiers of Zayd. But don't give all your time and all your energy to these affairs, because something is always going to take place. Strengthen your religious identity, because your religious identity will carry you through the thick and the thin, the setback and the successes that exist in society. Don't think that there is ever going to be anything more important to you than your religious identity. Strengthen your institutions of learning, strengthen your masajid and your institutions of religious participation and practice. This is going to be your source of support. And if those institutions are strong, then they will be able to help you whether you have a period of struggle in society or a period of success. So these are two lessons that we learn from the lifetime of our Imam. May Allah make us among the followers and the upholders of the path of Ahlul Bayt. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما علي أمير المؤمنين وعلى فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين وعلى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل الله مخرجه وظهوره وجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره والمستشهدين بين يديه صلوا على محمد وعلى آله. Astaghfirullah li wa lakum. I seek forgiveness from Allah for myself and for all of us present and for all mu'mineen and mu'minat throughout the world. This is a period of trial for our society, for the Muslim community, but it is also an opportunity for us to come together and support one another, to support causes and voices of justice in our country and throughout the world. As a believer, whenever we look at what is going on in the world around us, we always look at it through a religious lens. We see this as a test from Allah and an opportunity from Allah. Insofar as it is a test, we ask Allah to provide us support to successfully pass the test. And insofar as it is an opportunity, we look and see, what can I do to help the cause of Allah, the cause of truth? And both of those journeys, they begin within us. We ask Allah forgiveness. We ask Allah for His protection and His grace, because that is our source of strength, to pass the test, to make use of the opportunities to achieve the pleasure of Allah. May Allah provide us His protection and His forgiveness, and ensure that whatever we may be tested with, our faith remains strong, and our commitment to the path of Allah and the path of Ahlul Bayt never shakes, never wavers, never lessens throughout our life. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsani wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi ya'idhukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Salatul Jumu'ah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله وأن عليا ولي الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم. ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا. بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما. قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا اغفر لنا وارحمنا وعافنا واعف عنا في الدنيا والآخرة إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر.
الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته الله أكبر الله أكبر